Welcome to the Position Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Capasso, and we're here to learn together. I'm on a personal research project to understand how elite performers from the sports, military, and the creative arts make successful transitions into their personal and professional lives beyond those early pursuits and endeavors. And I have a theory that the environment that someone chose or that chose them, and the position or role that someone played in that environment that they chose or that chose them, can provide the keys to understanding their best path forward. We're just getting started, and I'm excited to share these dynamic stories with you. Let's dive in. Yeah, let's get into the conversation. I'm so excited to sit down here with you today. And what a cool setting. I mean, being in Aspen, Colorado, when the leaves are changing is one thing, and that's epic in so many ways. But here we are, Mad Dog Ranch Studios, Jimmy Buffett's old studio, who then transferred over to Glenn Frey from the Eagles. So I would say there's a lot of good vibes around us here today for this conversation.
There are lots of good vibes. It feels like old Aspen vibes.
Say more on that. What do you mean by that?
Well, my family moved here in 1991. And I remember we moved out here literally in a Toyota Previa minivan with like way too many people in the van and a dog, an extra kid, a U-Haul. And we listened to, oh no, now I'm going to forget who they are, the country band. Shoot, I'm totally ruining the story, but it will come to me. This is just a spur of the moment here. A country band. We listened to it like over and over, and Jimmy Buffett the whole way here. And then, we end up living here, and that country band would play here in like, the Aspen tent, and like these big names back then, like people lived here and performed here, and it felt like we were all living together. So that's what I mean by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. That's who I'm talking about.
That's it.
I knew it would come.
I'll have to check them out. Yeah, there's a lot of greatness that goes in and out of Aspen and spends time here and gets inspiration here.
Yeah.
That's pretty compelling. Well, we first met at the Lair Hippo Founders event in Tahoe. And I was really blown away by the time that we got to spend, us as founders, as part of the Lair Hippo portfolio, with you as a guest speaker. And then you facilitated a conversation for all of us to have amongst each other. And I was blown away by just, you were telling your story, and it was so authentic. You were so open, and you made it, you brought us along on that journey with you in a way that, I think is really hard to do. And I think you did it in a really compelling way. So I'm just curious, going into that environment, because what were you sort of expecting to do? And I'm curious how it netted out after the fact, coming to this group of entrepreneurs randomly at, a resort in Tahoe. What was it like for you coming in and experiencing that vibe?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for compliments. I was a little nervous for sure, but I was also excited. When I originally spoke with Ben about the event, he wanted me to come in and do like a keynote talk. And I was excited to do that, but I kind of pitched him on let's do the keynote, but then what I've been doing is this work called spiritual psychology, and I now facilitate this work, and it would be so cool to have the talk sort of be the foundation and the principles for the workshop to give everyone the experience of sort of what I'm speaking to. And I was so excited because they were into it. I mean, it was really kind of like a little innovative to say yes to what I was speaking to. And I guess I was telling them that for me, instead of talking about what we're good at and what we've done and what we've accomplished, like what I've found in my own journey, and I'll say healing journey, is that when we actually talk about the things that we don't like to look at, or that we're afraid to look at, or that we're embarrassed of, or the things that we've been struggling with or fighting against or resisting or have guilt or shame around, like that thing that we think is our weakness is actually our portal to like our untapped potential. And so that was supposed to be the theme of what we were talking about. And, in that talk, I did talk about my own darkness, my own struggles. And the point of sharing that so vulnerably was for me to like really embody like this practice that when we lean into it, on the other side of it is this expansion and this release of the things that have been holding us back from stepping into like the truth of who and what we are.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing because the way you just described it now, it makes perfect sense to me why the group was so willing to go along and like you said, so into it ultimately. And because you embodied it, you modeled for us on stage kind of what it looks like to face that darkness. And then you asked us to do that amongst each other, right?
Yeah.
Break out into small groups and do that.
Yeah.
And right, everybody totally leaned in. And you would expect that anyway out of a group like that, right? It's a group of entrepreneurs who are, going after it every day with, everything they do is pretty much throwing everything at it. But to share in that way amongst a group of people that you don't know, it takes some modeling to kind of see what that looks like. So I think that's what you did for us. Actually, I didn't realize that until you just said that. I think that's very very cool. Well, for you personally, getting to that place, I'm curious, what was your own blocker in getting there? How did that journey go for you to be able to get to that place where you could, I guess, lean into it so fully and fully kind of walk through that door? What was that like?
Yeah, let's actually talk about it, shall we?
Yeah. Perfect. Let's get right into it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll kind of speak to my story. It's kind of hard to do the overview, but ultimately, I grew up in a childhood environment that was very loving in a lot of ways, but also really like harsh and a bit, well, not a bit. It was violent with my brothers. I grew up with 3 brothers. There was a lot of like physical, like beating each other up and name calling. And this was like my childhood. And there was a lot of love too. Like I felt very loved and taken care of in my childhood. But my childhood, I found like that's not normal. That I got my ass kicked and told that I was worthless by my brothers all the time. And so I developed this really harsh internal dialogue inside of myself. And I really kind of grew up thinking that I was not enough. I was incapable. I was worthless. I was a bad person. And in sports, when I participated in sports, and I came from a very athletic family. So for all of us, sports was like a huge outlet for all of that like emotion that we were all experiencing, sometimes super suppressing that emotion, but sometimes like super expressing, but in really unhealthy ways. So sports was like an outlet for all of us. And so for me, when I was playing sports, that is when I finally felt like free from that harsh inner critic that I had inside of myself that would literally filter me from like speaking or asking questions because I didn't want to appear stupid because I was told I was stupid all the time by my brothers. So I developed this like guard at a very early age. And when I was playing sports, that guard came down. And in 1988, I was watching the Winter Olympics on TV, Calgary Winter Olympics. I think my family was on a ski vacation in Michigan. And I decided I want to become an Olympian. And, at the time, I didn't know this, these limiting beliefs that I wasn't enough was fueling that dream. And it was in some ways. And in other ways, that dream was just like a heartfelt dream. Like sports is where I felt most authentic. So, of course, I wanted to become an Olympian.
And I have a quick question on that. Because obviously you said you came from an athletic family and you're very athletic. Did different sports provide a different outlet for you? Like, was there something about snowboarding that in particular gave you a certain type of freedom that other sports didn't? I'm curious.
It's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, originally being from Ohio, I participated in very traditional sports. I love soccer. I was on the swim team. I was on the diving team. What else did I do? I played volleyball, not very often, but kind of. But mainly soccer was a big part of my life. But when we moved to Aspen, my life completely changed, going from traditional sort of country club experience to Aspen, Colorado, mountain town. And I started learning how to climb mountains and camping, and started figure skating and playing ice hockey. I kept playing soccer. And at the time, I was a skier, and I started to snowboard when I was I actually went to a school where every Wednesday we had a half day off in the winter to go up on the mountain as part of our education. So awesome. Only in this valley would we have that.
Yeah.
And one of those Wednesdays, I took a snowboard lesson with friends, and I absolutely fell in love with snowboarding. Not because I was good at it, because the first day anybody snowboards, no one's good at it. But I loved the culture around snowboarding. I love that it was sort of like the counterculture, rebellious sport to skiing, that it didn't have rules, and there was a style to snowboarding. Like in the beginning, it was very much there was a certain style, and there was a lot of camaraderie in snowboarding. And really in the beginning, it wasn't even considered a sport. It was more just like this thing people were doing, and it wasn't allowed on most mountain resorts at the time, too.
Okay.
And I kind of loved all of that about snowboarding, but I still had this dream of being an Olympian, which was more like traditional. So I started choosing snowboarding at a time when it was the furthest thing from being an Olympic sport. But I chose it because of the creativity and the style and the camaraderie. It was more like a way of being.
Yeah.
And I wanted in on that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then what was it about being an Olympian in particular that attracted you, created that spark for you? What was it?
You know what it was? I remember watching on TV, and it wasn't a specific sport that I was like drawn to. It was just being an Olympian. I recognized like these are people who show up every single day for something, and they fall, they get hurt, they stand back up, they keep going. A big word that goes with the Olympics is excellence. This level of excellence, of like rising to this level of going beyond what most people do. And to me, I think as a 7-year-old, I didn't really know what it was that was compelling me towards becoming an Olympian. But I can look back now and just say, I think when I watched Olympians, what I saw like a human being who had become like superhuman. Like, but not because they were superhuman. Like the journey got them there, and they were authentic, and they were strong, and they were resilient, and I wanted and free. Free is like the main word.
Yeah.
Free. And
so they
was
seemed
not
free to you.
And I was not free.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be that.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And let's dig into some of that. And also you said the word journey a few times. And again, I had my own journey through on the soccer path, both going through professionally and as on the Canadian Olympic team. And there is just something compelling about being on this adventure that you know that you're going somewhere where few people are willing to go, and doing it in ways that feel very important and sort of require a lot of excellence and bring out a lot in you that can be super compelling. So that journey was I was just thinking about it this morning as I was on my hike and thinking about our conversation. Is you talked about sort of getting knocked down, getting back up, keeping going, staying on this journey. So for you had plenty of that. It sounds like you had some of it in your upbringing with your brothers, and then plenty of it obviously in your career.
Oh yeah, I brought that violence into the sport that I chose. The devil that we know.
Yeah. Maybe there's some comfort in that to some degree.
I'm working on that.
Yeah. At what point did you ever hit a point where you maybe thought about getting off that train and maybe not staying on that journey? Curious, you kind of had this spark. You decided to commit yourself to this. Was there a moment where along the way, or even early on, where maybe you didn't think that was a thing that you would follow through with?
Sort of the biggest leaping off point for me was I was a senior in high school, and I was deciding about college. And I had gotten accepted into a couple different schools, and I had this big decision to make. Am I going to go to college like I always thought I was going to go? I worked really hard. I've always been a very hard worker. Because I thought I was stupid, so I had to work really hard. So anyway, I worked really hard to get good grades so I could go to a good college. And that's kind of, growing up in this town too. This is a town of very high achieving people. And so that's what my class was. All of my friends were going to some of the best schools around the country and even around the world. And here, I was faced with this decision. Am I going to go to school like I thought I was going to, or am I going to follow this dream that I've had since I was 7 years old? Because in 1998, snowboarding was inducted into the Winter Olympics for the very first time. And it was now 1999. I was a senior in high school, and I knew, okay, I can actually go to the Olympics for snowboarding, maybe. And so this is an option, and this is a path. Am I going to choose it or not? And it was a very pivotal point in my life because no one really understood what I was doing. It was now an Olympic sport, but it was very controversial. Snowboarding thought that, course snowboarders were boycotting the Olympics because the Olympics was sort of the antithesis of what the snowboarding spirit was. And then the Olympics was looking at snowboarders as like, this is just a sideshow act. Like, this is a joke, pretty much. And that belief was perpetuated because one of the very first Olympic medalists for snowboarding was a guy who very quickly tested positive for weed and then revoked his gold medal.
Wow.
So it further perpetuated like snowboarders aren't real athletes. They're just weed smoking bums. And here I was thinking, I'm not going to go to college to become a professional snowboarder and go to the Olympics for snowboarding. So it wasn't really accepted anywhere, but I had this dream, and I had support from my mom. She basically said, Gretchen, you can go to school whenever you want. You're not going to always be able to follow this dream. So I did. I call it the leap of faith. And there was no path like to becoming this. I had some people that I could look to, but there was no like treaded path like in traditional sports. Like, oh, if you're going to do this, this is what you have to do to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that leap of faith, I'm trying to put myself back in that time and in that situation. That's a pretty big leap of faith.
Yeah.
Not only to think you can make the Olympic team and know how big of a leap that is, but then also with the sport that's sort of in question. And it sounds like your mom was a big support system in that, which is very cool to hear. Was there anybody else along the way? I'm curious, like that you would really look to that you felt like was, an important support system to kind of keep you on the tracks, kind of keep you on the mission. Anyone else that comes to mind that?
Well, my mom was the biggest because she not only understood and supported what I was wanting to do, but remember, she was the one, I didn't tell you this, but she was a single mom with 4 kids. And she was the one who moved us from Dayton, Ohio to Aspen, Colorado by herself. She got a job here. I mean, we had background and history in Aspen. My grandparents they used to have a place here, and they had it since the 60s. So my mom grew up here in her early 20s. So she had, friends, and she had a network of people she could lean on. But ultimately, she was the one who had to make her own leap of faith to change her life. And so seeing that,
very cool,
that my mom did that, gave me, just showed me what was possible. Like, you can do it. You can change your life and it can work.
That is amazing. That's very cool. Well, yeah, I could see that 100%. And then, so now you're off on this journey. And I was also thinking about this on my hike. I was like, I've had my share of setbacks and injuries and stuff, but you've had your share and more than your share. And I was like, does Gretchen sit around and like stack rank the setbacks, kind of reorder them based on a different time and place? This was the worst. No, this one's the worst. Because there was a lot that you had to overcome along the way. So I'm curious, kind of take us through, you kind of post now, you've made the decision, you've taken the leap of faith, and without knowing any better, you could just assume it's a straight path and a straight line forward. So tell us more about kind of what you walked into next, and maybe what were some of the more formative experiences in that.
Yeah. So that was 1999. I think I officially became a professional snowboarder in 2001. And in 2001, I was also invited onto the U.S. snowboard team. And that was the first year that I found myself competing competing for the Olympic qualifiers, to make it to the 2002 Winter Olympics. And at that time, I had potential, like physically, I was in there, I was in there. But I was, I hadn't found my groove yet. And those Olympic qualifiers, a friend of mine who was on the U.S. snowboard team with me, and who later became my coach, halfway through the Olympic qualifiers, he basically said, Gretchen, you have a skill set to do this trick called the crippler. And I think if you do it, it would really set you apart and you could probably make the team.
What's the skill set, or what did he see in you?
Well, I was doing this trick called a wildcat. It was basically just a straight over backflip where I would land switch and then go into the next wall switch. A crippler is that. It's a backflip, but you're rotating 540 degrees down the half pipe. So you land riding regular out of the trick. So the whole idea here is that you could ride out of it with a lot more speed to keep up your amplitude for the rest of the run. So, it was a great idea, and he was right. I did have the skill set. But in the middle of Olympic qualifiers, I decided to start learning a brand new trick. And granted, since I was 7 years old, I always wanted to be an Olympian. So I'm not just like, this isn't just like, oh, I'm finding myself competing, for the U.S. Olympic team. Like, this isn't a big deal. This was like the biggest deal ever. This was the closest I had ever come to my dream. And so because I was like super attached to going to the Olympics, I was in fear. I was constricted. I felt so much pressure. I wanted it so badly that I couldn't relax. And then on top of it, I'm throwing in this like dangerous brand new trick all at once. And so the Olympic qualifying process was horrible. I was so nervous. I was literally throwing up right before my runs. Like I always got nervous before my competition runs, but in the beginning of my career, it was like horrendous. I was trying this trick, And I wasn't getting it, and I was falling. I was giving myself black eyes. Like, talk about force. I was forcing everything, and I was forcing through fear. Like, not a good combo. And even as horrible as it was, I ended up tying for the very last Olympic spot with one of my best friends. And we didn't just tie, it came down to a triple tiebreaker. And she ended up going, and I did not. And at the end of that day, I went home. Everybody else went out celebrating because they're going to the Olympics and I'm not. And I went home and I just kind of reflected on that process. And the first feeling that I had was relief that it was over. And after realizing I was relieved that it was over, I realized that that's actually pretty disturbing, that I've wanted this since I was 7 and I was so close, and I'm relieved it's over. And so I realized I had been the one getting in the way of myself. And I vowed to myself that night, I said, I will never let anything be more important than my everyday joy of being a professional snowboarder. And if every single day I get to enjoy being a professional snowboarder, working my way towards maybe becoming an Olympian, even if I never become an Olympian, that will be enough.
Yeah.
And that vow is like the paradigm shift that changed everything for me. Because the next season, well, the Olympics were over and now there wasn't so much pressure, but now I had this new perspective and I started winning. And I started winning because I was now riding relaxed. I was enjoying myself. I was present. And because I was in that state, I started landing the crippler. And, I had been working towards the crippler, but I had been working towards it with a lot of constriction and force.
Well, I was going to ask, was there anything you did specifically to make sure or to help yourself get into and stay into that mindset? Because again, you were in a different mindset, sort of forcing through fear, gripping harder, let's say. And then you found a way to sort of get this perspective that I get to do this, and you're going to find gratitude in it, and not I have to or I need to, I get to. But how did you stay there and get there and stay there through that season? Or did you just switch?
So this is like the big story.
Okay.
This is the big story. So I won the first few contests of the season, and I did it just kind of effortlessly. I mean, the crippler, I think it took me a year to figure out that trick. But when I figured it out, I was like, oh, I figured it out. And it also elevated the whole rest of the level of riding in the rest of my run. And so I'm having fun. I'm riding better than I've ever ridden in my entire career. And the first few contests of the season, they didn't really matter. So it was all just like fun and experiment, and it went rather well. And then I found myself at the X Games. And the X Games, this was 2003. So the X Games had been held in Aspen now since 2001. And I had always choked at the X Games because it's in front of my hometown, and I wanted to prove to everybody that I had made the right decision and not going to college, and show everybody that I was this great snowboarder. And of course, that much pressure that I put on myself just cracked me, and I would fall. So this year was different. Everybody's saying, I'm the gold medal favorite, and I'm coming in riding better than ever. And I knew my tendency was to focus on the end result, to focus on winning. And I knew that never served me. And so sticking with my game of enjoying myself, being present, enjoying being a pro snowboarder, not thinking about the end result, that always kept me in that state. But now the stakes were higher. And I feel like that always happens. Like when we make these shifts in our consciousness, I feel like life always comes and gives us like a test. Like, are you sure? Are you sure going to do it this way? What about just going back to the old way?
Yeah.
You don't want to go back to the old way?
It kind of worked before until it didn't, but yeah.
So that's what happened. I show up at the X Games. I drop in for my first qualifying run, and on the first hit of my first run, I throw the crippler and I fell. And so I ride to the bottom of the half pipe, and as I'm waiting for the snowmobile to come and pick me up and take me back up for my second run, my world goes dark, you know? Thoughts like, nice, Gretchen, here you are, the gold medal favorite. And now you're not even going to make it to finals. And then I start like future fantasizing and thinking like, oh, when I don't make it to finals, like now I'm already counting myself out. So when I don't make it to finals, there's always going to be next year, you know, and I still have a family that loves me. You know, like the way our minds work, that's the way my mind was working. Yeah. And so I get on the snowmobile, and as we're riding up the mountain, I realize where I am. I become aware. Oh, okay. I'm in this mind state. This is the mind state I was in all last year. And this is the mind state I vowed I would never be in again. Like I wouldn't be here anymore. So I had the awareness. I get dropped off at the top. And instead of going over to my coaches and my friends and just sort of like going through the motions and seeing what happens, I actually took some intentional space. I walked over to a place, and this became a pattern of mine throughout my career. I took a space for myself, and I just started breathing because I didn't know how to shift. I had never done it on purpose, like in this pressure cooker situation. I had never done it before.
Shift, you mean going from, you now have regressed back into this mind state.
This mind state of I'm not gonna be able to do this, and you know, there's always next year, counting myself out. I'm an idiot for falling. You know, all this negativity and this harsh inner critic, and like barraging myself with why I'm not good enough and why it's not going to happen. So I go over to this space and I just start breathing. And as I start breathing, the breath, like just the conscious awareness of the breath, helped open up my field of vision to see like where I actually am. Meaning like I became present because I was not present before. I was in my mind. I was not present with where I was. So I became present. And as I became present, I was standing at the top of the buttermilk half pipe, and I could look down and see Panda Peak, where I learned to snowboard for the very first time. And I thought about like little Gretchen learning to snowboard for the very first time. And I started to smile, just thinking, wow, like I've come so far. And then I looked up above, which is, the slopestyle park where I grew up with the Aspen Valley snowboard team, competing, learning to compete for the very first time with all of my teammates. And I smiled thinking about all of my teammates and my coaches who helped me get here, like where I was, standing at the top of the buttermilk X Games half pipe, as the gold medal favorite. And I realized like that's when the gratitude came in for how far I've come and who's helped me get there. And that's when I realized, well, then I looked down at the half pipe and all of the people standing on the sides of the half pipe and realizing like these people who are standing at the half pipe, they don't care who wins or loses. They're just here to be inspired, like to see the best snowboarding in the world. And I realized if I'm snowboarding like this dark storm cloud because I'm not going to make it to finals, that's not very inspiring. Like, we all see that, like in athletes, when athletes are lit up, you know when they are and you know when they're not. And it's very inspiring when they are. Like, they're in their authenticity, they're on fire, like it's magnetizing. And I realized too, on that day, I realized a bigger purpose behind what I was doing, where, you know, not too long ago, my biggest purpose was I am going to claim my joy no matter what. Something even deeper came forward in that moment. And it was that I want to be the type of athlete that inspires others to have the courage to go out and live their dreams. And I can't do that if I'm not enjoying myself. So that was sort of like a deeper purpose that came forward. And so this all happened like within a very short period of time. And everything shifted. And I realized, like, okay, I just want to go out there and give everyone the best show that I know how. And all of a sudden, you know, things went from like this threat and I'm not going to win the X Games into like, this is a challenge and an opportunity just to like go balls to the walls and inspire people. And so with that, everything, my whole state, my whole inner state shifted. That's the shift. My whole inner state shifted. And I was called up for my second run. And as I was buckling into my bindings, this was like out of a movie. It really was like Rudy, you know, like Rudy, Rudy. So I was buckling into my bindings and I look up and the people who are lining the sides of the half pipe start throwing this giant pink poster of me over the sponsor banners. My sponsor, Oakley, that year had made this giant pink poster of me that said, "I'm Gretchen and I live here." And so everyone's throwing the poster over the sponsor banners. And in spiritual psychology, there is a principle that says outer world reality is a reflection of inner reality. Mm. And that to me was like, I had made the shift inwardly, and now my outer reality was like, it's green lights. And so I strap into my snowboard and I drop into my second run, and I end up going from last place in my first run to first place, end up going into finals and winning my first X Games medal. And even though like winning my first X Games medal was incredibly fulfilling, more importantly was this like blueprint that ended up becoming really the blueprint for my success throughout the remainder of my career.
And that blueprint, is that specifically sort of your ability to sort of go inside and change your own mindset and perspective? Is that what you're kind of referencing in the blueprint? Or
like the conscious shift from fear, limitation, doubt, misinterpretation into acceptance, wholeness, inspiration, gratitude, purpose, making that shift.
Yeah, that conscious shift. I think that's maybe the operative words in there. And it's interesting just hearing you talk about this, because you said something that was very reassuring earlier in the conversation, which was that the first time you snowboarded, you fell many times, because nobody's really good at snowboarding the first time. Very reassuring. But the other thing that's reassuring is this internal kind of wrestling of the alligator inside, is something that everybody deals with. And as an athlete, you're just presented with more opportunities that are pretty high stakes to have to grapple with it with maybe even more intensity than maybe the average person who's not in those kind of situations, let's say. But do you find yourself, is this sort of like a process? So if I think about meditation and sort of the little that I know and have read and have tried on my own, but it's sort of like begin again, right? You kind of find your breath, or you come back and recenter. Do you find yourself deviating or going outside of that and then having to go back in and reclaim that conscious shift? Or do you have it to a place now where you rarely get pulled in that other direction? How does it work for you on just life?
Such a good question.
Yeah.
So my entire career, I toggled back and forth. And I just want to highlight a really important point. So that fundamental limiting belief that I held, that I wasn't enough, that I was worthless, that I was incapable, that vow I made to myself around if every single day I got to enjoy being a professional snowboarder, even if I never became an Olympian, that would be enough. That right there, I have perfectionist tendencies. And that shift of like, I'm enough right now. Like that's ultimately what I was shifting into. I was going from, I have to prove my worth. I have to win in order to be loved, in order to belong. Like my whole identity is depending on this outcome. Shifting from that to, I work my ass off. And today, I'm going to turn everything off and just allow who I am and what I can do on my snowboard to be enough. And I'm going to let what happens happen. That's it right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And to folks that might be listening and thinking like, that their edge is sort of like in that extra stress of the thing, or somehow they're going to will it to happen rather than letting what's supposed to happen. Just like we said, coming into this conversation, we're like, let's just have a great conversation and let what's supposed to happen. But for those people that are still wanting to hold on and sort of grip harder, let's say, what have you learned about like how that really works? Like you've experienced it personally, but as you've helped coach other people, have you seen it? Like how do you reassure those people that actually what you're saying, it didn't just work for you, it actually works for many, many people at scale, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does work for many, many people at scale. Love that terminology right there.
Sorry, that's the founder of me going to like business speak. Sorry for the business speak.
I love the business speak.
Yeah. I'll revert back to athlete speak.
Yes, it's so, I truly believe that we all have to be allowed the dignity of our own process. And we are all going to learn on a different timeline, and we are all going to learn differently. And for all of us, it's going to take different things to get us there. And for me, it took a lot to get to this place because I tried it my whole career and it worked really well, but I kept taking it back. I kept taking it back and taking like my perceived control, like the illusion of control, like trying to take that back and trying to control what was uncontrollable. But like life is gonna take us there. I believe all paths lead there. So there's no danger. Like we're all going to find it. It's just like, how much do you want to suffer? And I'm a fighter. So I did some fighting.
Yeah. Well, what I love about the way you just even answered that question is, you didn't try to force it, right? You didn't try to explain why it's so. You actually went through the door of like, well, you'll find on your own time why it's so. And there's actually a coach that said to me one time around some decision I was going to make to do something, which I won't get into here, but he said, Tony, sometimes you have to go to know you shouldn't have gone. And if I think about the number of times in my life I've just had to go to know I shouldn't have gone, it's just a process you have to go through sometimes, right? Which is to try to keep banging your head against that door and then realize that's not the door to go through.
Yeah, we got to bang it as many times as it takes.
As it takes. Yeah.
Like literally.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do.
Yeah. Well, and I exactly. So I had a question, or I want to go deeper onto the limiting beliefs. And I, like, as I think about, I love the concept of trying to identify what those limiting beliefs might be, whether it's for us personally, maybe it's in an organization or a group of people. Do you think that there are just like some limited set of limiting beliefs that we can, find some playbook to work through, or is there sort of this infinite set of limiting beliefs that again, in your experience and now working with people doing this, having experienced it yourself, like say more about limiting beliefs and how to identify where those are and kind of work through them.
Yeah. Well,
because I want to reduce this down to like, there's just 3 kinds of limiting beliefs.
Yeah,
and let's get a framework
do.
to go.
And then let's scale it.
Yeah, let's pour some fuel on it and let's go scale it. Yeah.
Well, I believe, so an orientation that I have been learning through the University of Santa Monica, and also really, I do a lot of different spiritual programs. And anyway, an orientation that I hold is that every single one of us are inherently whole, wise, resourceful, peaceful, content, fulfilled, inspired. That is our inherent nature. And then we come to planet Earth and we have a childhood and we have experiences where things, we have things happen to us and we create beliefs. We interpret the experiences to mean something about us, to mean something about others, or to mean something about the world that we live in. We create the interpretations. And then, based on those interpretations and those fears, we then trigger these behaviors that we act out in order to not experience or feel the beliefs and the fears that we created. So it's like, well, it's the cycle of insanity, but that's like the ego. That is the ego. And so we are operating in this physical world reality through our mind and through our emotions. And our emotions are actually just responses to the thoughts, the beliefs, the attitudes, the fears that our minds are holding. And so I think that our limiting beliefs, and what are they? It's infinite. But ultimately, our ego's design is to make sure that we're loved and that we belong and that we're safe. And so many of our limiting beliefs are kind of revolve around that. And, I developed I'm not enough. But then on top of, so in order to not feel enough, I created the behavior of perfectionism. I created the behavior of overachieving. I created the behavior I created the misinterpretation that I had to achieve in order to be enough, in order to be worthy. And so the whole thing is this like wild ride. But the way we can like bust out of it is through like this spiritual context. And this might be different from what you talk about on your podcast or not. I don't know. But the spiritual context is sort of back to that. We're inherently whole. We are not just loved, but we are love. Like we are love. And actually, Earth is a school that serves for the purposes of spiritual awakening, or said differently, serves for the purposes of awakening us to our inherent wholeness, brilliance, wisdom, creativity. And so anywhere in this Earth school where we are not feeling our inherent nature, so where we have our peace disturbed or we're upset or we have emotional reactivity, from this context, that is actually information for us to go inside and see, what are we holding? What old operating system are we working from that is no longer working because it's being triggered right now, not to drive us crazy, but to actually like heal into something more expansive that's in more alignment with the truth of who we are. So this has been my journey, because what I did is, I became an Olympian. I won a silver medal. I got tons of opportunities. I started making a really good amount of money. I was living in Aspen. I was living in California. I got married to an incredible man. I said yes to all of the opportunities. I was still one of the best snowboarders in the world. I started getting really burned out. And I went to the next Olympics, conflicted, because I started to see, oh my gosh, my whole life, I have been basing my worth on what I'm doing, what I'm achieving, who I'm becoming. And I know that's not the truth of who I am, but I also didn't know who I was. And those Olympics were super conflicting for me, because I wanted to win a gold medal, and I could. But I also had this limiting belief and this resistance, because I saw that America was so gold medal hungry. And I am such a rebel. That's one of my coping mechanisms too. I'm a rebel. So I was just like,
Yeah.
fuck off. I don't need a gold medal to be happy.
Yeah.
Like, I can be
Yeah.
happy. I can be me without it. And so I went into those Olympics super conflicted. And I fell, of course. I was not in alignment. And this is another like really core foundation of the work that I do, is if you have a goal, I believe our goals and our dreams are very much like rooted from our soul. They're like there to help us become who we are. And the goal or the dream is just the vehicle to pull us into that. And you got to get your physical, your mental, and your emotional in line with that goal in order to actually become it. And working out all of the limitations and all of the misbeliefs and all of the, the limiting interpretations of reality, like that happens as you are working your way on the goal line of life. You're also elevating on this soul line of life, so that you can step into and become that dream. You do become the dream. You live into being the dream. And you were always that potential. You just had to clear all of the stuff that wasn't you to get there.
Yeah, you have to. I love that, the goal line and the soul line and achieving that. So for you, did you feel like you caught the soul line as your career was kind of, as you were getting into the twilight of your career, or did it come after or beyond? Like, I'm curious, and where are you on that trajectory? Because I'm sure it doesn't sort of stop at one level. The soul line sort of, so how do you think about reconciling? Because a lot of what this podcast is about is people who've had great athletic or military or creative arts careers and endeavors, but are now making a transition into the rest of their life. And one of the things that I personally felt and then have seen and really believe is that there's so much more actually that we can't see that life continues to provide. But I'm curious, how do you see that trajectory, and where are you on that through that journey into now?
Well, so ultimately I had built this life to help me feel like I was enough. But at the end of my career, now all of a sudden I had built this life that I was dependent on to be enough. But now I had to uphold it. I had to uphold this life now. And that put more pressure on me. And at the end of my career, I fell back in. Like, throughout my career, I had the oscillation between like being in my authenticity and then like taking my self-will and my own power back and coming back into restriction and force. And at the end of my career, I went back into that force. I felt like I had to push myself in order to continue to be at the top, in order to uphold this life that I had created. And I hit my head 3 times in a matter of a few months, took a little time off, and then went back to training with my coach in Park City. and we were working on the trampoline, and I had a horrible, horrible fall where I shattered my eye socket, and I gave myself the 4th concussion in a matter of like 4 months at this point
Wow.
now. And I had, it was horrible. I had double vision for 6 months. I had to have eye surgery where they actually put the eyeball back in place because the orbital flora had dissolved. And so at the end of my career, I really had gotten lost. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing anymore. I didn't care about competing anymore. I didn't care about winning anymore, but I didn't know what to do with myself. And I also was holding up this life. And that's why I was forcing it, because I was in fear. Um, so I retired in 2014. And actually, when I had the accident, that gave me a little bit more time to do a meditation retreat. And I had been meditating since 2009, but this was my first like week-long meditation retreat. And it changed my life. And I didn't understand what meditation was, and I wanted to understand what it was. So I signed up for the teacher's path. I became a meditation guide. 2014, I retired abruptly. It was more survival. I didn't do it strategically. I didn't let my sponsors know that like, what do you think about this
Yeah.
decision? And like, let's do this together. Nope. I just like retired on live TV at X Games in Aspen. And I just needed out because I was running on fumes and I was really hurt, like far more hurt than I even knew at the time. I spent the next few years going down a rabbit hole of spirituality, studying yoga and meditation. And in 2017, I was in India at an ashram, using meditation as a way to disassociate from like this inner turmoil that I was having. And I had a manic episode, or what in Western medicine, they call it a manic episode or a psychotic episode. And I was diagnosed with bipolar. And in a very short period of time, I had lost my identity as a professional snowboarder. I lost the community that I had grown up with and worked with my whole life. I had lost my sense of purpose and even like my reason for waking up in the morning, my reason for even taking care of myself, because before I took really good care of myself, but there was a reason for it. I didn't just take care of myself. There was an agenda behind it. And now I was bipolar. And shortly after that, I got a divorce. So my entire life came crumbling down. And it really showed me that I had been identifying with all of it. Because what was left, now that I wasn't a snowboarder, now that I wasn't a wife to my husband, now that I was not someone who was healthy, but who was bipolar, I was left with those limiting beliefs that I had learned to like transcend my whole snowboarding career. I had never healed them. I had just learned how to get around them by building a life that proved to me that I was enough. But now I was facing them and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I thought that I was, because of the stigma I held around bipolar and people who were bipolar. And I didn't even know that I held this stigma until I was diagnosed myself. I was like, oh, well, then everything that I've thought about myself is true. Like I am broken. I am incapable. I am less than. I am not enough. Like this diagnosis is now perpetuating my limiting beliefs. And so it took a lot of years of struggling, fighting. I was still fighting in the dark. Fighting
You're
in the
such a good
dark. Oh, man. But I finally, and at this point, I was like, looking for somebody to help me. Like I thought I would have to go to the Amazon forest and like find a shaman to help me out of this. And I would like look on my TV, is there a documentary I can watch that will tell me what to do here? Like and in 2019, so only a couple years later, I started to go to the University of Santa Monica. And my teachers, Doctors Ron and Mary Holnick, I studied with them for 5 years. I'm still studying with them. But 2 years into the program, I started waking up and realizing what I was learning. And they told us from the very beginning, and this is something I said in the commencement speech, you are worthy, you are enough, your life circumstances are not who you are. You know, you are a divine being having and using a human experience for the purposes of awakening to your essential nature. And I didn't know what that meant for so long, but 2 years in, I finally started to get it. And it took a lot more things happening, which we don't have time for today. But ultimately, I started to have these experiences of like, oh, I've never had to go out there. I've never had to go out there to be validated in my worth or my value. I've always been that. And it's okay that I did because it's all been leading me here. And honestly, the bipolar, the concussions that then triggered the bipolar, if it weren't for that, and this is why I do the work that I do now, where we lean into the shadow, we lean into the dark, we lean into the places we don't want to talk about, is bipolar is the very thing that helped give me the experience of my inherent worth for the first time in my life. And untangling the judgment and the stigma and the limiting beliefs I held about myself, others, the world, took a really long time. And of course, I'm still doing it. But ultimately, becoming bipolar and having to untangle that gave me the freedom in my consciousness to finally see that I've also been using alcohol my entire life, and alcohol was perpetuating my symptoms. And I started going to AA. If I had not gone to USM, I never would have gone to AA. I'm 3 years sober now. I am someone who never thought I would be sober in my entire life. I come from a family of drinkers. And sobriety has been this like linchpin for me. And ultimately what this is I'm slowly stepping away from the things that I was relying on, I was giving myself away to, and I'm coming back to myself and sourcing from myself. And I'll never drink again, and I'm happy that I can say that, like, gratefully. I also right now, I'm so extreme. I also right now I'm like doing a year of no relationships, not even being friends with well, you're a colleague and a friend with like males who are single, like not even having the hit of that.
Yeah.
To truly, because I've also given myself away in relationship. And so I'm really doing this like some ground zero work with myself. And what it is I'm like proving to the part of myself that I learned to abandon at a very, very, very young age, for the attention, for the validation of my dad and my brothers, who could never really give it to me the way I needed or wanted. And I abandoned her, like my little one, for that. And I did that for the rest of my life until now. And so at this point, I'm really just spending time with that part of me that's always needed something out there to fulfill me. And I'm sourcing it inside.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am in the journey.
Along the soul line. Well, I'm curious, like that step towards doing the USM program seems like pretty pivotal on your journey, like that decision to do that. Uh, what did it give you specifically? And what else was sort of on the table and how did you end up there? And I'm thinking about, other folks that are in a point of transition, looking for the next step to take. Say a little bit more about like the process of finding that in particular and how you went to find that.
Okay, so how did I find myself in particular?
Well, yeah, exactly. So the program basically, I guess the program basically gave you the gift of maybe spending more time in learning, maybe learning more around that.
The intricacies of my inner world that I had been like, I didn't even know I had an inner world. I kind of knew, but I didn't really get what that was. And because I no longer had any distractions to go out there, I was forced to do what I was afraid of doing, which was to go inside. The reason I was afraid of going inside is inside was a very harsh place. It was not safe inside.
Yeah.
But they taught me how to lovingly go inside.
Got it.
And like make friends with and bring compassion and love to the harsh inner critic. To the perfectionist, to the part of me that thought I was worthless, to the part of me that thought I was a bad person, like to love these parts and to allow them also, like I had repressed all of these parts of myself as well my whole life. In order to become something else, I had repressed them. So giving expression to, allowing myself to feel like there was no time for that in my world on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, so I guess if we transition a bit like to you now professionally, you've done a lot of that work. You continue to do that work, obviously, and find ways to go deeper. How do you think about the professional work you're doing, both as a guide, as a coach, right, as a leader of people, kind of in this process, whether it's the retreats that you're doing or coming to visit us as a founder group. What direction are you trying to take that professionally? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
Professionally. Yeah.
Right now I'm working one-on-one with like a few key clients who I love. One of them actually is a woman who wants to go to the 2028 Summer Olympics for equestrian. She's badass and she reminds me so much of me. It's crazy, right? How the people who come to you are so similar. She basically is me. And I get to tell her everything that I wish that I had known. So working one-on-one with clients, and I've sort of been exploring all different types of things, workshops, retreats in Costa Rica and Mexico and here in Aspen. But where I've kind of gotten more clarity even just this summer is that I'm going to focus on one-on-one clients, keynote speaking, and these corporate workshops. And eventually I've been working on a podcast myself, telling like the whole full story, with another classmate of mine from the University of Santa Monica for the past 2 years, and would love to eventually also create a documentary.
Mm. And if you created a documentary, what would you want most to sort of come out of that? What would you want to come out of that documentary? What would be the best takeaway in your mind? It's a version of like, an athlete gets asked, how do you want to be remembered? I don't know if I love that question or hate that question, but in the case of the documentary, what is it, if you were to summarize, like if someone said it was telling their friend about the documentary and why they should watch it, I've actually recommended as much as he can be polarizing, an Aaron Rodgers documentary, because he went through an Achilles tear and had a good friend go through that. And I said, you need to watch the documentary because you're going to see his mindset through that process or whatever. But in the case of someone maybe recommending it to somebody, what is it you hope that how they describe what comes out of that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Yeah. I'm probably not there yet.
Yeah.
But what I love most about, the reason I want to tell my story, what gets me most excited about telling my story is just the human journey of, what I already spoke to is like how we come in and we're these like perfect, pure beings of light and love, and then we get traumatized and we have these fears and these limiting beliefs that set us on this path and this journey that's like beyond anything we could have ever controlled, yet we think we're controlling it and we're not. And what we learn along the way and what we wake up to, and like coming back into like the authenticity. And ultimately, for me, where this journey has taken me is this healing of the beliefs, the judgments, the coping mechanisms, and really claiming and residing in, and it's a practice, in the authenticity of my soul. And as I am living with this like awakened heart, I am experiencing like the blessings of being guided in, just living out now this love that I know I am. And you asked the question about, transitioning as an athlete or transitioning as an entrepreneur, and like, how do you do it? How do you go? Like, how do you know where to go? And for me, like, this is the ultimate journey, is like finding yourself. Because when you find yourself and when you know that you are like, you have everything you need, like you are the gold. Like I've been going out there trying to get the gold my whole life. And I just realized I'm the gold. And like that is the greatest gift, because now it actually doesn't matter what I do.
Yeah.
Like there are vehicles and there will be opportunities, and it doesn't matter, because every vehicle is just an opportunity to live this, like live the gold that I am, and inspire that journey in others.
Yeah. And maybe you make me think like, there's a lot of different advice that people have given on this podcast, a lot of ways to think about that transition, but almost what you're highlighting is the importance of, like, you got the gift of essentially a major injury, retiring, having sort of everything taken away, or you gave it away immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave you the ability or the time to do the assessment, right? The self-assessment of where you really are, and it exposed where you really were. And maybe for some folks making the transition, it would just be easy to just fumble to the next thing, right? Find the next business
I wanted to fumble to the next thing so badly. I was so angry, I was struggling with myself, but I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
People would ask me, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
And I'd be so angry when they asked me that question. Yeah. I think one time I don't know. And like the response to the other person was just like, oh, that's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like I was in I don't know for so long, and there's something very beautiful in that too. Like the patience that I had to learn. And in some ways I'm still there. Like I'm still in transition. I really have been in transition from 2010 to present, I would say. And I still don't really know, but that's it. Like being there of like, I'm going to do the best I can with the vehicles that come. But for me, the most important part is this like human journey of discovering like the gold of who you've always been.
You also make me think like maybe, like you just said, you've been in transition but maybe that's kind of like the point is, whether it's about growth, transformation, it's like, it's going to be a constant thing.
Mm-hmm.
The point is maybe the trajectory you're on, or the things you're unlocking, or are you stepping into that, that awakening that you should be stepping into essentially, and taking steps in that direction. Because if I think about it, I now personally gotten to a point where I tend to operate more on what I would refer to as a flow state in most days, most weeks, most months, because I'm just working on the things and spending my time in the ways that give me the most joy or give me the most meaning, for me. And so I think less about time. And actually had a friend of mine who is a former athlete who we actually share a therapist in common. And he was talking about some advice that he kept getting around his time is coming. His time is coming. He just needs to get, and he didn't want to hear that advice because I think he was in a state of wanting to control an outcome, get somewhere, buy some time, achieve some goal. I mean, how many times did you write a goal down in a journal with some time horizon around it, right? Because the competition's coming up on this date or by this time or by 2002, right? It's everything has a time constraint, which inherently puts a whole other set of conditions around it, right? And so, but maybe that's okay. Like maybe being in transition, being in transformation, again, being in growth, a state of growth and change is sort of the constant. But are you aware? Are you conscious along the way so that you can, maybe move in the right direction?
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yeah.
I don't know how we are on timing.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is really important to get a little deeper into what I meant by the goal line, soul line.
Yeah.
So in spiritual psychology, and this is like specifically to what you just said, that's why I want to throw it in. We're living in two simultaneous realities. So the first reality is one that most all of us buy into. It's the physical world reality that makes up our everyday existence. And in physical world reality, this is the reality where we're always trying to better our lives, ourselves, improve. There's a destination. So whether we want to, get educated, get a good job, start a family, build wealth, get healthier, it's like, you're going from where you are and you're working towards where you want to be. So this is becoming. It's a world of duality, right, wrong, good, bad, win, lose. Like, as sports people.
Yeah.
So this is like the physical world reality. And we as divine beings having and using a human experience, we get to experience physical world reality through the ego, through our mind, our beliefs, our thoughts, our attitudes, and through our emotions, feelings, negative, positive. I'm upset if things aren't going my way, or I'm happy because they are. So this is the world of duality, and we're becoming in this reality. So that's kind of speaks a little to like your friends, how he's saying like, what's the next thing to become, like the goal. So as we become more and more aware beyond 5 sense, observable, material reality, there is another reality that a lot of people buy into as well. It is the spiritual context or the soul line of life. So if the goal line looks like this, we're going from A to B, and it's, it's a destination. The soul line, we're rising, we're uplifting, we're elevating. In our consciousness, we're awakening to. So in this world, we're becoming something, but in this world, we're awakening to what we've always been. And what we've always been is whole and creative and wise and fulfilled and joyful. And on the soul line, we don't have to become more loving. We don't have to become more spiritual. We are. And so we use physical world reality and the mental and the emotional levels to uplift our consciousness on the soul line. And so that, to me, like what you just said, maybe it's about just learning and growing and like this inner state of awakening, like that would be the soul line.
Yeah.
And so for people, like this is important context because for people who are very identified with physical world reality, which I was so identified with the life that I had built, the career that I had, my husband, my community, the things that I did, like that was my world. And so when that went away, I had to start awakening. I had to look at the things that were there.
We're there, yeah. We weren't gone, but we're actually present. Yeah.
So for people in transition, it's like this is like a huge time for awakening.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the big takeaway around all of this is that to spend that, again, like you said, when you're competing and you're, things are moving so quickly, you're off to the next thing that you don't have the time often to put that work in, unless maybe you do get a devastating injury, right? That sidelines you and you can, have that opportunity. But even then you're still inevitably wrapped up in a lot of those things. But then when it's over, to spend that time, and I don't know that even myself, as I transitioned out of competing, that I give myself that time or spent that time. So it probably took me longer and a lot more work over a decade or 15
Dignity
years.
of your own process.
Exactly.
We all do it differently, different timelines.
Yeah, but had I been able to put a little more work up front, but it actually took for me, my first marriage ending to be a devastating moment where no longer was everything sort of just going up and to the right in terms of, on the goal line, that was a major fail on the goal line in my mind, right? So I had to become more awakened to, and more aware of what are the things holding me back, right? What do I have to leave behind? How do I have to change in the way I approach the world in order from what it was like as a competitor, as an athlete, right?
Yeah.
So, that's phenomenal. Well, look, I think that we could maybe let's wrap this conversation on that, and maybe there'll be a part 2 at some point, because you said there's some other areas we can go deeper on some of the other work.
There are.
I have a feeling this is like limiting beliefs. They're sort of endless, and there's endless places we could go.
I had endless experiences of challenging situations I got myself into.
Yeah, well, it's
that were very awakening.
In some ways, it's the gift of what you've put yourself into in life, right? You've put yourself out there. You've gone after it, right?
Experiential education.
Totally. And it's funny because I do have friends too that will say to me, like, I have the same therapist that I've been seeing for like 18 years at this point. And I find most of the time now we talk more about like restaurants that we've been to recently or, movies we've seen. But I really value his perspective and insight. But I have friends going like, I'm kind of done. Like I don't really have that much to talk about anymore. And I was like, what are you not bumping up against in life?
Right.
Let's play this game of life a little harder, because you're going to bump up against edges if you're in the, if you're really, putting yourself out there and
that's just
life.
it.
Yeah.
If your issues are your opportunity for growth, but if you don't have issues, like, all right, well then go for that dream, because that's going to stir up all of your issues.
Yes. So that's great. Well, look, this has been a lot of fun, as all of our conversations have been, and I can't wait to spend a couple hours on the road bike tomorrow. But thank you for doing this.
Thank you
for sharing your story. Amazing. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please review and follow this podcast on all your favorite platforms. And if you want to continue the conversation one-on-one, feel free to reach out direct. You can find my information in the show notes. And we want to share your story. So if you're passionate about helping others through transitions to find their center and find their best path forward, feel free to reach out and let me know. Until the next time.